Raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, the time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Raising Cain Show. We are happy to have a great guest tonight to talk about something that is both local but also national. And so I want to tell you a little bit about who we're having on. Bill Ogden is the Tactical Civics Promotional Coordinator. He's also the founder of the Clearfield County, Pennsylvania chapter of Tactical Civics, one of the largest chapters in the Republic. Tactical Civics has an action plan to enforce the Constitution. The issues we currently face would not have arisen had the Constitution been followed and enforced. Citizens have a duty to participate in governmental oversight and to ensure the Constitution is followed as the highest law in the Republic. And with that, I am bringing on Bill. Bill, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So we met through, I think, through my campaign, but originally I heard about Tactical Civics before I decided to run. And I think it was Jeff Calhoun was the first person that I ever spoke to about Tactical Civics. And I had heard him on an X Spaces, and they were getting into that. And it was interesting because what you guys were talking about was stuff that was on my mind. And but Tactical Civics had already laid kind of the framework and the groundwork, for how to implement, bringing us back to, constitutional governance. And so it was very exciting, when I first heard about it, because so a couple of the things, and I hope we'll get into it a little bit tonight, is that really kind of struck or caught my attention was the idea of a constitutional grand jury and how that process works. That was, to me, one of the key important tools, because the problem with the government, and the problem especially with our Justice Department, the federal government, is it doesn't seem to matter that we have a constitution, because they continue to violate it all the time. So with that said, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let people know kind of how you got involved in Tactical Civics, and tell us a little bit more about what Tactical Civics is and what we can do.
Thanks, Nate. I'm Bill Ogden. I'm up here in Clearfield County, right in the middle of Pennsylvania. We're not the end of the earth, but you can see it from the top of the hill. We're on the cusp of the wilderness, elk and deer and bear and bobcat, alleged mountain lions. I don't know. Game Commission says they're not here, but they said the coyote wasn't here either. And they're all over the place. I live on the family farm. It's been in the family for a couple hundred years. My great-great-grandfather served in the Revolution, and they gave him a warrant of land for that service. So we've been here a while. After they stole the election, or they allowed the election to be stolen, I could certainly take that point of view. And a series of other, as a buddy of mine says, abuses and usurpations occurred. I'm actively seeking the answer. I'm just arrogant enough to think that I can make a difference. I can do something. I have agency. I am responsible. I can get something done. I heard on a podcast a fellow named David Zuniga talk about tactical civics. David laid out the first of all, our problem is ungodliness. And I said, really? That's the problem? And he referenced Romans chapter 1, verse 18 to the end, where Paul's addressing the city of Rome. And he says, you people always knew God was real, but you had to worship sticks and inanimate stuff. And so God has given you over to your stupidity. And then he lays out 24 specific things that sound like a busy day in Congress any day of the week. One of my favorites is, although they thought themselves wise, they were as fools. And just look around and see that going on every day. Now, I wrestled with that. Is it ungodliness? Is that the problem we're dealing with? Is it a spiritual war? Is that what I'm to accept? Number one, the country was founded to honor Jesus Christ. You ask the people 400 years ago why they're coming here. That's why. They want to worship in their own way. They want to do it, freedom to be able to do that. Didn't want to be oppressed by the king and so on. If you look at any of the history of the churches, you see it's oppression that drove people here so they could worship. Okay, so I accept that much, but really a spiritual war. And the thing that caused me to decide he was speaking validly. Global communism, in their Communist Manifesto, dedicated to Lucifer.
That's right.
Karl Marx's chief goal was to get Christ off the throne. So the enemy thinks that it's a spiritual war. I would suggest then that that's the battlefield where we engage them. That's one. Once you accept that, and of course we're secular man now in America. We're smart. We don't need all that Bible and stuff. Actually, yes, we do. Wisdom. It's a fun thing about wisdom. Timeless. What was true then is true now. That's why you pass wisdom down to the next generation. The fact that we bound it in a book and had it around for thousands of years doesn't invalidate it. Also in Scripture, it says, if my people who are called by my name will turn from their wicked ways, will humble themselves, kneel down and pray, I will hear their prayers in heaven and I will heal their land. There's a promise. What are the wicked ways? Well, we could come up with a list, usually of things other people are doing. And I tell folks, if I had a hand mirror, you could see the problem and the solution at the same time. We are not attending to our responsibilities in this republic. It's my fault that there's corruption. Why is it my fault? Because I didn't provide the oversight. Here on the farm, we live dangerous lives. We have dangerous animals, dangerous machines. We do dangerous things. We live out. And I decided I wasn't going to lose a kid because they didn't listen. And so if I tell you to stop, you don't take 2 steps and say why. Stop or you'll get hurt. It's actually kind of a contract. It's not because I don't love them. It's because I'm not going to lose a child to a raging bull or a stampeding horse or a guy with a chainsaw or anything else. And so, we enforced that discipline by providing oversight to the children, one way or another. Why don't we provide oversight to elected officials? The reason that they steal elections, try to inject you with things that you don't want, tell you can't go to church, which obviously is none of their business, is because we permit it. We failed to oversee them. And I can go, for the next hour in that, but the gist of it is there. Tactical Civics is an organized set of specific solutions for that problems. It's organized as a multi-phasic plan. I like the first 4 phases. Number 1, aggregate numbers. Number 2, cause a grand jury and county militia ordinances to be passed in your county. Number 3, pass an amendment to limit the size of federal congressional districts. Number 4, have Congress pass the Bring Congress Home Act and let them serve from the district. And it seems to me, I heard you say you wanted to be the one that offered that up in Congress.
Yep. Yeah, that was something that was very important to me. I've known for a very long time, and that a lot of the problems that we have stem from too much power in the federal government. In fact, I am a firm believer that the more collectivist that something becomes, the more corrupt that it becomes, and the harder it is to essentially to remove that corruption. I'll give you a perfect example. If you have a city councilman that is corrupt and you want to, get them out of office, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort compared to trying to remove a congressman, a sitting congressman. And that's why I think power is best, is least corruptible, the more local that it is. But there is another phenomenon that happens in America, which I think is a problem. And that is that while many people maybe know who their congressman is, a lot of people do not know who their state legislator is. They don't know who their state senator is. And they certainly don't know who their local county row officers are, or who their, school board members are. And that is a problem. So it's almost like this perplexing oxymoron, if you will. We have less corruption the closer that something, or we have more power, I should say, to prevent corruption, closer that our politicians are to the people. The problem is that the lower the level, the lower the person is on the totem pole in terms of power, less interested people are in finding out they are in, voting and things like that for them. Often people will go for Trump, if they're a Republican, or they'll go to vote for Biden if they're a Democrat, but they don't know about anybody else below that level of president, and it's really, it's a shame, because the fact is that, unlike other countries, where they don't get a say, like communist countries where they don't get a say in who they're going to, elect, we do get a say. And I would say that we have a much higher chance of, seeing somebody get elected, honestly. I have my concerns, with our presidential elections. But, again, there's less likelihood of cheating the more local you have things controlled. The more that is controlled at the state level, and if the feds, if they're trying really hard to try to get control over our elections, it's unconstitutional. So hopefully the courts will keep that from happening. But they've already wiggled their way in there through these electronic voting machines and the Help America Vote Act. And it gives a lot of power to the federal government to say, how and elections will be conducted. And some people think that that's a good thing, because they want to see things like universal background, or universal ID or something like that for voting. They'd like to see, certain, things that have to do with integrity. But again, if the power is in the hands of the federal government, and you have a far left administration, they can just as easily do terrible things with that administration. At least with the state, we have some level of buffer. If I don't like what's going on here in West Virginia, I can leave West Virginia and move to another state that has a better, circumstances for me and the way that I want to live my life. And that's why I moved to West Virginia, is I wanted to live somewhere that, that pretty much, was no holds barred when it came to the Second Amendment. I wanted to be able to defend myself, protect myself, own as many guns as I want, and not have anybody bother me about how much ammo I'm buying, or how many guns that I own, or how often I shoot, and all of that. So to me, having that freedom, is extremely important. But for somebody else, maybe that's not as important to them. Maybe for them, they'd rather see more of the, the social welfare, type of thing, see more programs and things like that. So that's the beauty of having this, federalist system, and having, our constitutional republic. So yes, I would have absolutely pushed for, basically decoupling the grand jury process from the federal government and pushing it back into the states where it belongs. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that the federal agency of the FBI should not exist as far as the Constitution is concerned. As far as I'm concerned, I see nowhere in the Constitution where it affirms half of these agencies existing. So
once we bring this dog to heel, I like to say, we can then start playing the musical game. Where in the Constitution did you get the authority for that?
Right.
Where in the Constitution does it say you can own 2/3 of a Western state? Where in the Constitution is the authority for the EPA or the Department of Education or the Department of Energy? How is it exactly that you feel that you have? And I look at the Constitution as a job description. You know, I like to take people backwards in history. My great-great-great-great-grandfather is the first white settler here. He moved 8 times in 40 years. He was 62 when he came to Clearfield. Came up the river from Lock Haven. He and his son, they found an empty island and they built a cabin on the banks at the head of the island. It was a clear field. There you go. And then he went back downriver and he got his wife and the other 5 kids, and they walked up. And it's a hike through the wilderness. And they settled here. His son married a Bloom. That was the first wedding of Clearfield County residents. And they had 16 kids that lived. So I meet a cousin a week. That's a community organizer right there. Somebody that has 16 kids.
Oh, yeah.
She, by the way, lived to 101. Just let that bake your noodle for a while. Think of all the things they didn't have. She lived to 101. Daniel Ogden lived to be 87, I believe, back in the day. We all live here. My daughter, to this side, lives a putter to the west. Her twin sister lives a 9-iron to the south. Their brother lives a 2-wood to the southeast. And we get together periodically for birthdays and such, and it always devolves into a municipal meeting, like the right way to put trash in the common dumpster, or whose turn is it to mow the lawns this week, or are you going to get the rocks out of the ditch for when the snow plow, because we have our own, we do our own stuff. Those are all municipal discussions. We are our own little community here. So too it was in 1797 when this place was settled. But as the population grew, eventually we organized, wrote up a job description and hired people to do certain functions. Eventually the Constitution has 17 specific activities, duties assigned to Congress. If they're not doing all of them, they're stealing time. If they're doing more than 17, they're stealing authority. And we need to have a meeting and put a letter in somebody's file the first time. That's who's supposed to hold them to that? It says it right in the contract. We the people. Mm-hmm. We are sovereign here. What kind of lunacy would it be to traipse around the wilderness for years to defeat the largest fighting force on the globe, only to turn around and make yourself subservient to some guy who managed to get himself elected? No, he's subservient to us. He works for us. And that's such a key principle that people don't seem to understand. You said about Congress doing whatever it wants. You come home, you find the 3-year-old writing on the wall in colored marker. The 11-year-old's in the basement putting off firecrackers. And the teenager that was supposed to be in charge wanders in a general direction from the liquor cabinet and says, "Oh, by the way, while you were gone, we passed a moratorium on spankings." Really? Sure you did. Yeah, that's going to hold up too, isn't it? I go even further. The Constitution was written to govern the people I hire. It says what they can't do. Barack Obama said it's a charter of negative liberties. That's right. What the government can't do to you. Yes, that's correct. That's what we wanted. We are an upright, moral people, or we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be self-governing, self-taught, self-reliant, self-motivated. I do not need some smart aleck do-gooder on the Potomac to tell me how to do things up here. And I'll stop now because I get up on a stump here about that.
I can appreciate that. There's a part of the Declaration of Independence that, to me, is kind of really the crux of everything that you were just talking about. And, It's the part where it talks about how, you know, the governments are formed for the purposes of protecting, you know, our rights. And when they cease to do that, I'm paraphrasing, of course, when they cease to do that, then we have the right to abolish those governments. And see, this is the problem I see right now with a lot of our, you know, federal government, and quite honestly, even some of our state and local governments, is that these people get in power and they think that they rule by some sort of divine right, or it's ruled by the fact that they have power, without any realization that we have a right to remove them. And the big problem within the federal government, you know, at least within the state, if a cop pulls me out of a car and beats the hell out of me, the federal government, the FBI, can step in and can bring a civil rights case against, you know, that police officer for abusing their rights, right? You know, deprivation of rights under color of law. We've seen it all the time. You know, it's been, in the news a lot in the last decade, where you've seen, you know, cops put on trial because of abuse of power and that sort of thing. But when it comes to the FBI can wield power, can abuse power all day long. We know the fact that they've done it with things like Section 702 of FISA, which is, you know, never intended ever to be used on American citizens, but was supposed to be for foreign intelligence surveillance only. But we know that there were federal cases where a judge said that there were 276,000 illegal uses of Section 702 of FISA to spy on American citizens. That is a direct violation of our Fourth Amendment. And yet, no one has gone to jail because the FBI is not going to investigate themselves. The Department of Justice is not going to indict themselves. In fact, you just had the House just held the Attorney General in contempt, and yet there's nothing that's going to happen to the Attorney General because they don't have the power, you know, of a federal police force to basically go and have him arrested. So, you know, this is, to me, the problem is that within the federal government, there's very little that can be done to bring justice to those who violate our rights. It's fine and good to go and wait till the next election cycle and vote for a new, you know, president who will appoint, you know, new leadership in all these different federal agencies. But what do we do in the meantime? And you know, how can we rein in the federal government where they've been abusing their power to violate the rights of everyday American citizens?
Yeah, the disputes in the government are like the HR department's mad at the shipping department, who's mad at the mailroom, who's mad at, and it makes great TV, I guess. Or they thought it would on C-SPAN. Here's how this works. Number one is we put a chapter in every county. If you look at the election map, the red places outnumber the blue places. There's more of us than there are of them. If we come together in the collective sovereign, if we organize, not go at this as lone rangers, one man railing against the system, but rather in unison, if we unify. We then pass our ordinances. The grand jury ordinance as written, it's in the book, The Great Reset, in the appendix, will allow 0.5% of the population of a given county, based on participation in the last municipal election, to petition the president judge to impanel a grand jury on issue X, whatever that is. Here in this county, that's 85 signatures. Once the grand jury is impaneled, they're seated by the judge, sworn by the judge, judge is out, they're equal in authority to the judge, superior to the grand jury, or to the sheriff, superior to the DA, can investigate wherever it takes them. And what they're looking for is there sufficient evidence to cause an individual to have to stand before the petit jury and prove they're not guilty. That's all. And the example I use in Pennsylvania, Second Amendment says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be questioned. If a well-meaning but misguided individual wants to do red flag laws, that violates their oath. Violation of oath in Pennsylvania is perjury. Perjury is a felony. Grand jury says, well, they violated your oath. Take them to court, convict them. They're out of office. We have a special election. When we impanel our grand jury and our militia functions where paid law enforcement has a conflict of interest. And
so real quick, I want to just interrupt because I want folks to understand something here. So when I first heard about Tactical Civics, and I heard that word militia, immediately, my mind went to, what everybody, probably most people think about when they think about the word militia. But I learned through studying and learning and reading a lot of the materials that you had provided to me, actually, that militia means something quite different in the Constitution. Can you get into that for a minute? Just because I think a lot of people listening need to understand this, and they need to understand what the purpose of the militia is, that it has a purpose not only during wartime, but it has a purpose outside of wartime. And I did go through, by the way, and read the book, The Great Reset, which is an excellent book. There's some kind of controversial things in there, but I highly recommend that everybody read this book, because what it does is it really lays out, the history of things like the grand jury and the militia, which existed pre-Constitution. And so I'd like it if you could, kind of get into that a little bit, what the militia is.
The controversial part is it challenges what we've been told we're supposed to think. That's why it's controversial. I got beat up one Saturday about the pledge to the flag. You guys don't like the pledge to the flag? I said, yeah, I want to use the same one Jefferson used. Okay, yeah, because Jefferson never pledged to the flag. There wasn't a pledge until 1878, which causes me to say, wonder what's magic about 1878. A lot of stuff happened in the 1870s. I wonder what large-scale historical event was going on, and it's the Civil War. It's troops on the streets for 12 years. It's destruction of... Anyway, the militia is the only law enforcement identified in the Constitution. I believe it's item either 15 or 16. It says, Congress shall call forth the militia to enforce the various laws of the land, repel invaders, put down insurrections, all of which would have been convenient in the last 4 or 5 years. The militia is can be made analogous to the volunteer fire department. It's your duty to be part of the militia. When the alarm goes off, you muster, like the men, show up in case we have to put down an insurrection or there's law enforcement. I give the example, let's say it's the sheriff who's corrupt, and just for fun, find the word sheriff in the Constitution. So the sheriff, we decide he's corrupt. Who's going to go serve a subpoena on him? Which deputy that he hired? None of them. They have a conflict of interest. So you send the militia. It's sidearms. It's law enforcement. There is a concerted effort in media to make us be scared of the militia. For instance, in the most popular television program today is Yellowstone. And on Yellowstone, the Montana 3%, a militia group is trying to kill John and Beth Dutton every season. Okay, they're terrorists. That's how they're presented. You can watch news programs about militias, Muslim militias or wars between militias. They want you to feel bad about it. It's such a normal course of life that we should function in law enforcement, that rather than discussing how many magazines Nate Cain has for what firearm, we should be discussing which militia exercise he's going to, and he needs all those firearms. We're discussing the wrong end of the amendment most of the time. It's militia that we're supposed to be doing. That's why you need those many different firearms. I'm well aware of the panic that strikes terror in the hearts of whoever about militia. And yet, what Washington say, an armed society is a polite society. When I still taught many years ago, the last thing I did was I was in alternative education. The kids they kick out of school, they gave them to me. My people. Nice guy. I liked them. God help me. Weren't bad kids. They had bad home lives, and they weren't good criminals. But I got to know local law enforcement. And one little statistic I learned is, of all the crimes that get turned into local law enforcement, they clear 49% of them on the books. That means 51% of all reported crime goes unsolved. The police don't come until the crime's been committed. They think that through. We were down where we were short-staffed on our township police, so there were several shifts empty, which meant the state police gave coverage. There are two state police on duty countywide, and they have to clear the crime they're on. Could be an hour from here before they report. Wouldn't it be convenient if there was some other law enforcement group in the area who could protect the populace if there were issues? That's all. Militia. Yeah. It's militia all day long.
Yep.
Grand jury.
And the thing to me that was kind of interesting about this concept of the militia, and I like what you said about it. It really resembles more of like your volunteer fire company. What is it that a volunteer fire company, they have authority, right? Because they're trained and they fall under, the local fire chief or whatever, but they're given equipment, they're given training. It's not like they're just, some Yahoo showing up as part of the bucket brigade. No, they're trained. And I think when you read the Constitution, it seems to me that the militia should also be financially provided for, should be trained. And because one of their purposes is, and this was something that I guess I had never seen it before, even though it is in the Constitution, that their job doesn't just lie during wartime and defending the country, but it also lies in executing the law during times of peace. And that's actually right in the Constitution. And so it's kind of interesting. I think that the other thing too that I've heard said is that the problem is I've heard some people say, well, we need to make our county sheriffs, they can be the ones to enact the law to protect the people. But you're right. Number one, there's not enough of them, and so that's where the militia could play a role in helping to protect society. But also the other thing that is a problem is the sheriff. Their job is strictly is really tied to the collection of taxes and things like that. And so there's a problem there, in having them, because what if what they're doing, is found to be unconstitutional or is found, and again, the militia doesn't act in their own, they don't act by their own volition. They actually utilize the court, they utilize a judge in order to, to basically give them the authority to go and conduct their activities in terms of law or law enforcement. So can you give me a scenario of how that would play out on, like just any old topic?
Here's what it said in the Constitution: to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. And to use the same descriptive term in the other one for the fire people, what you described was a well-regulated volunteer fire department.
That's right.
Well-regulated means it's trained, provisioned, and we're spending big bucks on fire engines. So, we make sure those guys have equipment. They fundraise, we levy taxes, we get grants, we do whatever. It only makes sense to do that for the militia. A scenario. So in the neighboring city, the city manager, who's an employee, he's not elected, he's an employee, it is alleged to have absconded with $850,000. There's all kinds of money moving. If we think that he's got, one was there was a zipper envelope with $97,000 in it, disappeared, and he claimed he hid it because he didn't want them to take it, and whatever. Who do I send to search his house? Do I send the city police that he's in charge of?
Very good point.
No, send a militia. Now, who do I get to investigate this? As it was the Attorney General out of Harrisburg. This is a Republican county, and that was a Republican sitting manager, and we have a Democratic state Attorney General. I don't know if you see a conflict there. I do. Mm-hmm. This guy was endorsed by the former Senate President Pro Tem. I trust maybe 25 blue collar people who work for a living in this county to look at the issue and decide if the guy should stay in court implicitly, beyond what I trust anybody in the state capitol, with limited exceptions. I just trust the local people to do it, because especially people that work for a living, they know exactly what theft, fraud, and corruption look like. They're confronted with it at work, and they don't like it. Honest people genuinely dislike dishonest people. It's funny. It won't take long to sort these things out. They will decide whether to bring forth an indictment. They will direct the district attorney to take them to court. A hearing will be had, and they could do it repetitively if they had to. There's no double jeopardy on the grand jury. District attorneys, well, I'll say they're good stewards of their resources, but they don't like to take trials to court, cases to court that they don't think they can win. They only want to go on winners. Well, they may get some losers from the grand jury, but we will cause that individual to defend himself. Why was it you used a company credit card to buy that piece of equipment you never turned in? Explain that to us. We have the evidence. It looks bad. But we've got a scenario here in the township where they've decided to do a forensic audit. Well, what's that mean? They're looking for money. And I moved. There I am. The Secretary Treasurer for 30 years, came to a public meeting and begged them to cancel the forensic audit, or at least not examine her. That's not a good look. That's just not a good look. The grand jury could look at and say, money got moved that shouldn't have been moved. You need to go to court.
And that's because the grand jury is independent of the DA's office. It's independent. A perfect example is a case that I was involved with where we did the cyber forensic capture of a man, Eugene Yu, and his company that was producing election management software. The DA for LA County, George Gascon, there's no way he was going to allow for that case to go forward. And so it was actually brought to a grand jury. The grand jury then issued the search warrant and the arrest warrant. And regardless of how George Gascon felt about it, he had no choice but to have their Bureau of Investigation investigate it. Unfortunately, he was able to pull some shenanigans in the end and basically, bury everything. But there may be a case that comes up as a result of that in terms of improper treatment of the case, because he basically violated the law. But that grand jury that brought the case, they brought it in the best interest of LA County and its citizens, in particular the poll workers whose data, was leaked to China. So I've got to jump to a commercial break. But when we come back, I want to talk about, more about what Tactical Civics is doing right now and how people can get involved with their, local chapters.
All right, so next up we have Julius here, and he's from his company Eco Inventions.
That's correct.
And he has the Eco Washer. Now, I see it says never buy laundry detergent again.
Right.
I think the laundry detergent people are going to be after this.
Yeah, they're probably not going to like you. What can my Eco Washer Special Edition model do? Everything. We eliminate all the toxic poisons in your home. No more detergent, no more fabric softeners, no more hot water. Sound too good to be true? It's not. Where did this technology come from? This technology literally came from the hospital industry. There's a super expensive commercial Oculus ozone laundry system used in hospitals worldwide. How did we create the Eco Washer SE? We simply miniaturized it using the advent of micro technology. These are like a solid state computer. No filters, no fillers, no ingredients, nothing. It runs the water through and transforms the water into an unlimited supply of nature's pure detergent and nature's pure cleaning supplies that will mop your floors, wash your carpet, take pesticide off of your fruits, veggies, fish, meats, and it'll make everything last much longer when you put it in the refrigerator. Hey, Stop supporting these corporate chemical villains and step up and get your EcoWasher SE today. The new EcoWasher SE is a chemical-free laundry and cleaning solution. Imagine, no more detergent, no more chemicals, saves you money, pays for itself, gives you a healthier life, and simplifies doing laundry. And now we're going to include 2 free Thunder Pure Safe Air Minis that purifies your home and sanitizes your surfaces like a thunderstorm in nature. Eliminates all odors. Plus, you're receiving $100 off by using code PODCAST on the new EcoWasher SE. Let me remind you, 2 free Thunder Pure Safe Air Minis plus $100 off during this podcast. Podcast is your coupon code at
military use when they need unlimited power during critical missions. Civilians like you can now get their hands on the exact same technology within 24 hours for pennies on the dollar. Folks, as a former infantry soldier, I can tell you this is the best and cheapest way to get reliable, unlimited energy. And no, I'm not talking about regular generators or the expensive solar panels. You don't have to be an electrician to do it. There's no maintenance needed. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And the best part, you won't need to rely on the power grid anymore. Click below now and hit play.
And thank you to our sponsors who help make this show possible. You can find the discount codes, the promo codes down in the show notes. And if you're looking at the buying the coffee, make sure and use A360. And thank you guys though for for listening. And remember to subscribe and like the show, and that really helps us out a lot. So Bill, tell me a little bit about what are some of the significant things that have happened since the inception of Tactical Civics. I mean, like what are some of the accomplishments so far that you guys have made in terms of progress?
At the end of February 23, there were 662 members Republic-wide. We're just short of 8,000 today. That's significant.
Wow.
Growth.
That is.
Our strategy will be that X number of counties and Y numbers of states will move in concert in the same 30 days to enact our ordinances. We're not going to go piecemeal. We are not going to be demonized by the media. There's a bunch of hillbillies and rednecks in Clearfield County doing this. When multiple counties move simultaneously, it creates market pressure. And we believe that it'll burn like a grass fire across the country. We are working right now to get to critical mass. Critical mass is number of members in chapters. Those members are actively learning either history and or civics, so that when it's time, they can train and prepare people for service in the grand jury and the militia. I do not want somebody to be sworn into, this is a nightmare. They get sworn into the grand jury and they say, okay, Your Honor, what do we do now? No, you're supposed to know. I was at one of our chapter meetings and they said, how many of you don't know what jury nullification is? 1/3 of the hands went up. By the way, most people don't know there's 2 kinds of juries. The only common information people have is how to get out of jury duty. Everybody seems to know that one, wonder why. And I told him jury nullification is, I'm looking for a reason why Nate's not guilty. I know Nate, he wouldn't have done that, not guilty. Or I know Nate, if he did do that, he had a real good reason, not guilty. Or I know Nate, you're darn right he did that. It's a stupid law, not guilty. Because the jury is to rule on the facts of the case and the law. We, the people, have oversight of the law. Why would that be? Because the king wrote the law, the king appointed the judges, thank God for the 12-man jury, or we'd all be in prison now. That's just that, we would have been oppressed like crazy. But if you don't know, if you had $1 million in the bank and nobody told you, you never got a statement, would you know you're a millionaire? You sit on top of the agency of this country. You are the chief magistrate. You are the part of this collective sovereign. but somehow it got turned upside down. I don't know if it was in the public school. I worry about what kids learn about authority in the public school. I've been telling people the schools aren't yours. It's not your school. What do you mean it's not? It's not your school. Take a look at the balance sheet, find out where the money's coming from. Whoever sends them the most money, that's whose school it is.
That's right.
And here it's the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, here it's the federal government in West Virginia. So
Right.
that's a big problem, because that allows for them to have an influence and a say in what is taught and how teaching is done here, even if it doesn't make sense.
If you're a dominant customer, if you had a customer that was giving you 2 out of every $3, and that customer said, I want you to work overnight on the 4th of July, would you do it or not? It's your dominant customer. It's that big account. I know what you do if you're in business. I want to keep my customer. That's the big account. That's the big fish we landed. The state says you need to have a left-handed pencil sharpener on every floor. You'll go out and get them because they're the ones here in this little footprint. Right. 2 out of every $3. That's the minimum. Comes from the state. We've got one up the river. It's more than 80% of their funding comes from the state. If I have a premonition that the homeschoolers are going to lead to the salvation of the republic, because those kids are able to think. They're able to interact with adults. They're not being propagandized. They ask why, and somebody gives them a sound answer. Here's another one. If you want your kids or grandkids to know something, tell them, because they're not going to hear it anywhere else if you don't tell them. Mm-hmm. Every time Madison, I'd pick her up the bus, I'd say, what did you learn today about the history of freedom? Nothing. Okay, well, let's talk, because, I'll tell her. We are the descendants of pilgrims, pioneers, and patriots. Somebody better be telling the kids that. Somebody better be letting them know, the word heritor. We are heritors of a free republic where we can come and go as we see fit. And this business of lockdowns, shutdowns, cover your face, don't do this, don't do that, absolute abuse. You probably know who Richard Levine is. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Richard Levine worked here in the state during the flu, and he was Department of Health. I go to the grocery store, and there's a sign on the door that says, masks must be the worn. It's the law in Pennsylvania. Really? Well, I helped elect a legislator, and he said, no, we make the laws, and that isn't one. We never made that law. So I'm reading the order, the executive order that came from the Department of Health, the exclusions, because they all apply to me. I have an exception. I don't have to follow it because it says right there. But I find the actual poster on the state's website. They were producing and providing to businesses falsehoods for publication to help with what, I don't care if you want to call it a mass psychosis, whatever it is, a psyop. We know a little bit about medicine. That covering your face isn't how it works. We know, But anyway, I digress.
So Bill,
go ahead.
Bill, where can people find out more information about Tactical Civics?
TacticalCivics.com. Jeff Calhoun, who will probably be a guest on this program soon, will give a 13-minute explanation, and there's a great big red button. Push it and join. But here's what to do. Somebody's going to call you and orient you. You probably heard from Jeff Graham. Mm-hmm. Figure out where your local meeting is and attend it. Think church. What do they want you to do? They want you to come to church. If you can't show up, watch it on the internet, but they want you to come because everything flows outward. All the promotions, all the next events, all the learning, it all, there's a focal point. It's your county Tactical Civics chapter. Get a Tactical Civics buddy. Find a friend. I'll be yours. Somebody you can call and ask questions to. What about this? What about that? How do I? And let's get this thing done. I was looking. Do you know the song "Try That in a Small Town" by Jason Aldean? It was real popular. Mm-hmm. 60 million views. The official lyric video on YouTube, 60 million views. Maybe somebody watched it twice. Where are those 30 million people? I'm not asking them to sleep in the snow with rags around their feet. I'm not asking them to go across an ice-filled river and fight the most fierce group on earth with short powder and shot. I mean, we're asking people to come to a meeting, become a little bit educated on some forgotten history and civics, and help restore order to a country that's not in order. You know, the inmates are running the asylum, as it were.
Mm-hmm. There's a book that you recommended that I read called The Great Reset. I would definitely encourage people to look into that book. I don't think I had to pay for it. I think it was free online.
That's free.
But, where can people find that? Can they find a link to that on the page?
When you join Tactical Civics, every book that we've got is available for free download in print and audio. Yeah. And, you know, I tell people you spend more for coffee at Starbucks than it costs to join Tactical Civics. Why, you know, and there's a moment where it's bet, check, or fold. Either you want the country or you don't. You know, take a look in your grandchildren's eyes and ask yourself, is this worth stepping up for, or are we just going to get run over? They went to war over a 2% tax. 2%.
Yep. Hey, there's a couple of questions or a couple of comments I wanted to just highlight here and get your response to. One of them here was about when you were talking about your grandmother living to 100, and let's see here. I had somebody that commented about that things changed when they started processing food. And, you know, I know that's something that there's a lot of interesting things about, you know, you were talking about how we've been taught wrong, you know, or we get indoctrinated basically. And I think a lot of that happens in our public schools. A lot of that is happening through the media and social media. And a perfect example of that, I remember years ago, this is like back in the 80s, they had a commercial where there was an egg that was walking out of a prison cell. And the egg, you know, and the commercial was, hey, eggs have been let out of jail. It's okay to eat eggs. Eggs are actually good for you. But there was this big push for, you know, egg whites, you know, which separates, of course, the yolk, you know, from the white. But there was an interesting, and the whole idea was the yolk is where all the cholesterol is, and it's bad for you, right? So don't eat that. But we don't get cholesterol from eating cholesterol. That's not how cholesterol is actually created in our system. And there was a really interesting study that came out that showed where they did a double-blind, placebo-controlled study with, you know, human participants, and they had several of them, you know, eat nothing but eggs, you know, whole eggs, and then others, you know, that ate the egg whites, and then those that, you know, were given, you know, some sort of substitute that they didn't know whether they were getting it. So you're double blind. But what was interesting was that the people who ate the egg whites had no change in their cholesterol profile at all. But the people who ate the actual yolks, they actually had higher levels of the LDLs, which is the good cholesterol that you need, that helps to counteract the bad, right? So it was kind of interesting. And that's just like one example of where I think the misinformation that's put out there, you know, some of it's just a lack of knowledge, but some of it is it's manipulation and controlled by a lot of these, you know, big corporations, and the government is in bed with them. I mean, you know, you see this all the time, especially when it comes to, you know, things like COVID and the masking and all of that. I remember watching, and I don't understand how people could not see this, but I watched it with my own eyes, where Fauci said, well, you know, the mask isn't really doing anything. It's just more for, you know, making people feel better. And then later he's like, oh, you need to be triple masking. You know, it was just insane. So I think that there's a you know, I'm curious as to when you were talking about your grandmother, I mean, like, what was her, you know, I'm sure they were probably, you know, this is somebody living on the farm, eating things naturally and growing their own food. And
it was a different time. Yeah. Chestnuts were flourishing here in Appalachia. Pork, we grew it for the fat. We wanted 4 inches of back fat because lard had practical applications in cooking and other processing. The government wasn't involved. That thing with the eggs came out of a Senate hearing where the senator leaned forward and said to the witness, "Doctor, we don't have time for you to complete that research. We have to get a report out now." And that report demonized eggs. And then later it undemonized eggs. And of course, why am I listening to them? The most recent one has the food pyramid completely upside down. Most of your discerning dieters know the word ketogenic. They've done some sort of ketogenic dieting. It's a reduced carbohydrate diet. It's heavy on proteins and so on. It is the exact opposite of the modern food pyramid. But we're pushing the food pyramid and wondering why the kids are obese. Yeah. We can't figure it out. We'll look at the crap we're making them eat. There is so much information available. But here's where I come back to the hand mirror. What's your responsibility in knowing the facts? Mm-hmm. I got a buddy that's fighting leukemia. He went into an oncologist and he was recommended a drug. He said, "I'm a pharmacist. I don't know. I'll do some research." The doctor said, "No, you don't do research. You do what I tell you." That isn't going to fly. That's how people get killed in this country.
Well, and that is quite honestly, that is how people operate, even when it comes to politics. You don't see, people. Oftentimes, it's not. What blows my mind was, I think in West Virginia, you had 80% of the people who vote in primaries were over age 55. That means that most of your working people who are going to be affected by things like taxes and different laws that are passed by the state legislature or even by the federal government, they're not even voting. So they're not voting in the primary. And so that means that basically when it comes to the general, they're just going with whoever was selected, essentially.
I talked to them, and their response is usually, "My vote doesn't count." And right now, it's kind of hard to argue that.
You're right. That is true. That is hard to argue that because of what has happened. And that's one of the reasons why I think we absolutely have to see Donald Trump get elected. If for no other reason, then there's not going to be any trust in our elections again until the stolen election, and I 100% believe it was stolen, until Trump serves the term that he was elected for. There will not be any trust in our elections again.
We can do hand ballot or paper ballots, hand count same day. Yeah. And the militia can help supervise.
So I have another comment here, and this one's a little more controversial because it kind of counters something that you had mentioned earlier. So I want to get your comment on it. So this has to do with grand juries. And grand juries are not constitutional because they are secret proceedings. So what do you say to that?
Wonder why they put them in the Fifth Amendment then.
Can you explain to me the difference between a grand jury versus like what happens with the FISA courts? So my understanding is that like the FISA courts really are a truly secret proceeding, meaning there is no representation for you at all. But in a grand jury, there is representation. Supposedly, right? There's supposed to be somebody who's supposed to be representing the person who is being, I guess, who's being, I don't know what the right terminology is, but for the proceeding, whoever it is that's being looked at, there's supposed to be somebody in there who's supposed to be representing the rights of everyone, right?
By definition, what is the individual that the grand jury is investigating? They are by definition what?
Well, they're innocent until proven guilty, for one.
Okay. They're suspected of criminal activity. That's how they are suspected criminals. And if they are powerful criminals, guys taking $850,000 or more out of a city, what kind of influence can he pay for? What kind of muscle can he pay for? Grand jury proceedings are secret to protect the grand jurors, because if they could be threatened, bought, if their families could be threatened, if their homes or farms could be burned, they would be. There are people who would resort to that to influence a grand jury. So the proceedings have to be secret, but they're not final. All they do is determine, does the evidence exist that would cause us to come up with an indictment so that these people can prove they're not doing what we suspect they're doing. That's all. It's not a statement of guilt. It's simply an indictment. Now, they're going to have to go and have a lawyer and present in front of a jury, present evidence, do discovery. Let's look at all the facts and so on, and let's sort this out. Tell me wherever you are that there's not some suspected corruption in government. Tell me. Mm-hmm. I got a phone call today. The police are pulling everybody over that leaves the bar and breath testing them, but when they get the judge's sister, they take her to the judge's house. Okay. Now, I don't know if that's fraud or corruption or not. People don't like it very much. I get written up and she doesn't.
See, one of the things that I have concerns about in regards to, how we could effectively, go after corruption within, especially at the federal level, is the federal government's got tools that we don't have at the state level. They got things like 702, and they use it all the time, and they use it illegally all the time. I'd like to see, I don't think that the federal government, and particularly federal law enforcement, should be more powerful than local law enforcement. I think that is a problem. And that's something that I'd like to see, done away with. I have no problem with the military under Defense Intelligence Agency, whose, charter is clearly defined to going after our enemies abroad. I don't have a problem with them using surveillance tools abroad, against foreigners. But I have a problem with a domestic agency using them inside the United States. And I think the Constitution has a problem with that too, because I remember when I was read on to that program, and I was read on when I worked for NSA. I was part of a cyber protection team with Marforce Cyber, and we were detached to NSA as part of national mission. And they made it clear if we used it against an American citizen, then we'd go to jail. And yet that's not what I'm seeing happening at all. I'm not seeing anybody going to jail. And I also worry about prosecutorial misconduct not being, there being no action against that. We've seen with all of this, stuff that's gone on with these fake trials, faux trials against Trump. How can that be resolved? Who's going to go after, Fannie and Letitia James and Bragg and all of these guys?
We have to break the law for your own good. That's the rationale.
Yeah.
And if people accept it, they accept it, I guess. We get an amendment passed that limits federal congressional districts to 50,000 people. There's 6,800 congressmen. Tactical Civics helps find, vet, and elect them. Their first order of business is to pass the Bring Congress Home Act. They sit in the district now. Now that they're in the district, they're under state law, not federal law. Now
that's a very good point.
They're under the jurisdiction of the grand jury and the militia. Every smart criminal knows to bounce jurisdictions. So if I stay under federal jurisdiction, Congress controls what the federal courts may or may not consider. So they're holding, both sides of the deck here. Bring them home.
It would also, I think, severely limit the influence that lobbyists have, because they have one place that they can go and get to them all, right there in Washington, D.C. If our members of Congress were here in our state, and maybe they get together once a year or something, for just for some ceremony, but they spend their time in their districts. Could you imagine if they had to face somebody at the grocery store?
Right.
That they just pass some bill that I think that would be a very good thing. I think that
fascism is when government and big business combine to abuse the citizenry. Big tech, big pharma, military industrial complex, big media. When they come home, fascism stops, because they'll meet Mrs. Johnson at the Walmart, and Mrs. Johnson may have a piece of her mind to give them, or whomever. My state rep, he represents 60,000 people. We're talking about breaking a federal rep down to 50,000 people. I see the guy all the time, talk to him on the phone. He's not hard to find. He lives, in the county. Bring them home. Let them go to Congress like we're doing here by StreamYard or Zoom or whatever. pay them about half what they're getting now, limit them to 2 terms, make it against the law for a former congressman or senator to be a lobbyist. All of this is in the Bring Congress Home Act.
And I would say vice versa, by the way. I don't think lobbyists should be able to be, members of Congress, because they already have the corrupt relationships established, especially foreign registered agents, which is the guy I was running against. That's who ended up winning. He had $700,000 that came in through a dark money pool into the election, literally 7 days before the election, that basically ran, through a super PAC, multiple ads for him. The guy didn't even campaign hardly at all. But he was a foreign registered agent in multiple countries prior to becoming a state delegate, and he was he was the vice president of the Podesta group. So but yet
a guy for Senate who's still a Turkish national. How do you become a U.S.
crazy.
senator as a Turkish national?
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on, and we're here. We're a little past the hour, and I just want to thank you for sharing your insights, and hope to do some more of these and get into more deeper level discussion on some of the specific tools. I'm glad that you brought up about the Bring Congress Home Act. I do think that is absolutely something that needs to happen. That's something I would have supported had I been in there. And now that I am no longer a candidate, I am part of why I'm doing the show, so that I can continue to have a voice and speak up for the people of West Virginia and also for the people of America. And I intend on continuing to fight in that good fight. I am a member of Tactical Civics, and I think it's a great organization, and I'm very happy to see the kinds of things that they're doing, because I do think that action is better than just words. I think we actually need to do something and not just speak about it. So thank you for coming on. And, I hope that everybody will, continue to come back and see all of the different things that we've got going. God bless. I'm going to pray us out real quick, and then I'm going to go ahead and end the show. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for all that you've done, Lord, just in raising up awareness, Lord, amongst the American people. I pray that you would do more, Lord, that there would be more people awakening to the need for them to be an active and engaged member of society. And Lord, I pray that people would take serious their civic duty, and that you would help organizations like Tactical Civics and others, Lord, that are doing the good work on the grounds at the grassroots level, that you would help them to be successful. And that you would help us to find solutions, Lord, where there are just problems right now. And we just ask your blessing over all of our endeavors, and ask your blessing through the rest of this week. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks.
Raise some Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, the time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.